Legend of Total War here, and today we're doing another top 5 Total War video, this time covering the top 5 easiest Total War campaigns. Last time we did the top 5 most difficult campaigns, so we'll be using the same criteria that we used to judge them on this list. Now before I get into the list, I just want to briefly talk about tonight's live stream. As many of you guys know, I live stream pretty much every day, and I dual live stream, as in I stream to both YouTube and DLive simultaneously. Now most of the time I focus on the YouTube chat, but tonight's live stream will be a DLive focused stream because of an event going on called the Super Fans Festival. Now, I don't really want to spend too much time explaining it now. I'll instead just leave a link to it in the description so you guys can check it out if you're interested. But the gist of it is basically there's going to be a ton of giveaways going out during that time, and I'll be adding to that giveaway by handing out Steam gift cards in the chat during my live stream tonight. So if you want to pick up a Steam gift card, come to a live stream tonight. Anyway, with that being said, let's jump in now to number 5. Coming in at number 5 is Empire Total War, and the primary reason for this is that the AI is goddamn awful. On the battlefield and on the campaign, the AI just doesn't have a clue of what's going on. On the battlefield, the AI will constantly reform its army, even while it's under fire, and oftentimes giving you the time to inflict massive amounts of casualty before the AI even really gets serious at trying to fire back. Even with significant buffs, it doesn't really compensate for their incompetence. Now, on the campaign map, it comes down to a complete failure of diplomacy and also naval warfare. Now, the primary way of making a lot of money in this game, which is of course the crux of how you get powerful in any Total War game, is by sending ships over to the trade routes. By monopolizing trade routes, you can stranglehold a huge amount of money, even if you only own one region. And if you've only got just one trade partner, you can export all of your trade goods to that one person, making a ton of money. And if the AI is not prioritizing it, it just allows you to dominate the campaign, again, even if you don't have that many territories. In fact, having a lot of territories doesn't really make you that powerful. So, truth be told, the AI doesn't really know how to maximize its own efficiency in its own game. And on top of that, diplomacy. You can get some ridiculous deals from the AI, and deals that they should strategically think, you know what, this is a pretty bad idea, but they'll sign it anyway. And we'll do an example right now. So I'll go to France, and I'll say, hey France, how's it going? Do you mind if I get some military access out of you just for 5 turns? And let's do a bit of a region swap. How about Ireland for Alsace-Lorraine? How does that sound? Now you might be thinking, this is a pretty stupid deal, why would you offer this? Anyway, they do it. And since I asked for military access, it doesn't send our army away. And then, whatever. And then we got the settlement for free. Now, you might think, yeah, but what about the diplomatic repercussions? Really, truthfully, the diplomatic repercussions are not that bad. You can keep doing this stuff over and over and over again, and the AI will still think, oh, that's still a pretty good deal. I mean, these guys are pretty unreliable. They've broken every deal that they've ever made, but you know what? I think I will make that trade. Sometimes they just will refuse, but it's just, it doesn't hurt to give it a shot, and that's why it gets this spot on the list. Anyway, let's move on to number 4. Coming in at number 4 is Total War Rome 2. Now, Rome 2 does suffer from a number of silly bugs and AI derps, even after a number of patches, although that being said, since launch it has been massively improved, but that's not the real reason why this is getting this spot on the list. It's really a case of overly simplistic mechanics and a fairly clear amount of information on how to actually deal with the problems in this campaign. So, one thing that everyone has to do in any campaign is deal with battles, and there's 2 options when it comes to battles: fight it manually or auto-resolve. And in Rome 2 it has the most broken auto-resolve system in any other Total War game, and it's no surprise that they didn't bring it back in any of the others. So here we've got a scenario at turn 1 where we're up against a superior force, at least in terms of what the balance of power says. We do outnumber them, but they have a better force than us. If we fought this battle manually, you know, most people would be able to win, but not everyone. Instead, we could go to auto-resolve. Let's have a look here. Now, the thing about the auto-resolve is that it tells you exactly what's going to happen. There's no risk involved. You are not rolling the dice when it comes to the auto-resolve. If we take aggressive stance here, we will definitely lose, but we'll get a valiant defeat. Or we can look at balanced stance. Still, that's actually a worse defeat. Or we could look at protective stance, and then all of a sudden we get a Pyrrhic victory. We have a win chance of high, and it tells us that our remaining force will be 36%. Acceptable. And we just won the battle. A pretty important early battle on turn 1 against the Etruscans at no risk. And that's what it really does boil down to. Anytime you're supposed to go into a battle, there's supposed to be some risk of like defeat or loss of some kind. But with the auto-resolve system, there's no risk involved. The game tells you exactly what's going to happen. Now, one thing that does make the game probably a little bit more challenging is the politics system. This is probably where most people really get hung up on. The AI factions don't usually cause them any problems. It's more a case of secession wars because of bad loyalty. At the beginning of the campaign, the loyalty of this can be a bit of a problem. You get, what, 20 free turns where no secessions can happen, but then after that, you really do need to pay attention to this stuff. But, in my opinion, it's not very complicated. It's not very well explained, but it is, as long as you've got some money in order to do these political actions, so don't recruit too many armies, which you don't really need to, you really shouldn't be having too much of a problem. Most of the actions that you do on these guys, whether it be get them married, promote them, any other actions you can do, will give them temporary amounts of loyalty, and as long as you keep doing that, you'll be fine. And that's why it's getting the number 4 slot on this list. Let's move on now to number 3. Coming in at number 3 is Rome Total War. I don't think many people are going to disagree in saying that this is not a particularly difficult Total War game. I'd say that there's very few people playing very few of the factions that ever really came close to defeat, or even getting to a defeat in this particular Total War game. There are just many tools at your disposal with which to outsmart the enemy, and the AI doesn't really utilize it very often themselves, such as they don't really build forts on choke points, which is a great way of delaying your enemy, or delaying someone that you just don't want to fight against. The AI doesn't really make very intelligent diplomatic deals, much in the same way as Empire. You can trick them. Oftentimes they will, of course, ask you for ridiculous deals that you absolutely shouldn't accept, but you know, you can make a judgment call a lot better than the AI can. They just make poor decisions. On the battlefield as well, they tend to make poor decisions in terms of protecting their general. They'll either send him off to die immediately, or they'll hang him back somewhere and make it very easy for your cavalry to snipe the generals. And general sniping in this is just basically instant win in most cases, because it just destroys the enemy morale, and you can just mop them up quite easy. Running down enemy units in this just slaughters them almost instantly. In addition to that, defending your settlements in this game is pretty easy for most factions, but especially easy for pike-based factions, because holding choke points, you know, making them unable to be flanked, is just unbeatable in terms of, you know, the AI for pike-based factions, where you can, with just 2 or 3 units, take on multiple stacks of troops because they just can't get through your choke point. Utilizing towers as well, and having them having the entire army get burnt to a crisp with boiling oil, or ballista towers, you know, later on in the campaign. Lots of different ways for you to slaughter your enemy in Rome Total War, and the great thing about it is that it's all enjoyable. This is not a particularly challenging Total War game, but it certainly is one of the most enjoyable, and that's why it's getting the 3rd spot on this list. Let's now jump on to number 2. Coming in at number 2 is Thrones of Britannia. Now, I don't think it's a big surprise that this is getting this spot on the list. One of the big criticisms of Thrones of Britannia when it first came out is that it was too easy, even on legendary difficulty. And we see in this scenario here, which was the last time I played Thrones of Britannia, I just ended up with just a ridiculous amount of money pretty early on in the campaign. And I just got to the point where it's just like, ugh, there's no one that can stop me, because declaring war on people just became pointless. There's so many settlements out here. Look, you can see there's just no armies. Part of the big problem with this is due to the food and the manpower mechanic. It's just because there aren't enough mechanics in the game. As soon as the AI loses one army, just one, they're basically gone, because they can't replace them very easily at all. So it's very easy to defeat your opponents in this. You just need to get basically one good win in, and once you've done that, once you've gotten through the first 20 turns, no one is ever going to stop you. Because certainly you'll be able to beat them on the battle map, but even if as long as you've got the balance of power, auto-resolve is extremely favorable for you, even for sieges. And that's again another thing. The most difficult battles in this game are the sieges, and you just don't ever need to fight them. Just bring 1.5 stacks and auto-resolve it, and you lose any units at all. So there's a lot of things that a lot of mechanics you just don't need to worry about. Loyalty is another thing that you barely need to worry about anymore, just due to the way that the estates work. They went from one extreme to the other with this, and now estates, you just have your king hoard them all, try and actually get as many of the noble estates as possible, because every noble estate provides 2 influence and 3% tax rate to all provinces, which is why I'm making so much cash here. You know, I don't even need to have... The only reason I've got the tax rate high is to get more food. Not that I've got a problem with food. I could afford another... Oh my god, another... How many armies is that? It depends on what my food rate is and how many of those techs are, but I could probably afford another 10 armies, no problem there. There's no limitations on the number of armies you can have either. And this is things that the AI don't really manage. You know, even the big guys that are up here, they'll still only have like 2 or 3 armies maximum. So the AI really doesn't utilize its own potential in the game. And the strongest factions are usually a small coalition of a number of small factions that bound together. That's usually the most challenging part. Taking on a big guy is really easy, because the only settlements that will be defended are the major settlements. You just go around looting and pillaging all the minor settlements, and no one's going to do anything about it. And there's no population, so you're not really damaging the settlements anyway. It's just overall a very simplistic and easy Total War game. It should only take you the better part of an afternoon to master it. Go from normal to legendary difficulty straight away. Very easy Total War game. Anyway, let's now move on to the #1 easiest Total War campaign. Taking the #1 spot for the easiest Total War campaign has got to be Medieval 2. And the primary reason for that is actually due to AI cheats. Medieval 2 doesn't get much. It is a complete opposite situation from the previous video, where the top most difficult or challenging campaigns were ones that the AI just gets uber-duper super cheats. Medieval 2, they just don't get that. The AI has to abide by their economy laws. They don't get bailouts. If they go into debt, they have to pay off their debt. If they lose their armies, they don't get unlimited manpower. They cannot spam armies full of knights. They just cannot do it. So they have to abide by the same rules. If their entire family tree dies, their faction is eliminated, where it doesn't happen in later Total War games. The AI has to play by the same rules as the player, and AI at this stage here, unless it's programmed by a friggin' Google supercomputer, it's not going to be able to compete with the player, because it's only given simple commands. You know, if this condition, do this. That's more or less the conditions of the AI. They will oftentimes make some silly decisions. They'll break alliances and do things that seem a little bit odd. But for the most part, it's reasonable, but just not brilliant. The game also gives you so many tools to work with, which is one of the reasons why I love this game so much. It gives you so many things with which to obliterate your enemies. You know, if you win a battle or run down the enemies and execute all the captives, it absolutely wrecks the AI for many turns to come. And if you push your advantage there, you can end up taking half their cities before they've raised another army. So being relentless is something that the AI doesn't really do. Sometimes they'll besiege one of your settlements and lay siege for fucking decades, even though they've got the advantage. So there's a lot of things in which the player just has massive advantages over the AI based on essentially fair play. If the AI had uber cheats like it did in other Total War games and was able to spam 4 armies, you know, by turn 5, then maybe it would put up a much bigger fight. And maybe if the AI was given unbreakable morale stats and, you know, plus 20% extra melee attack and defense and armor and morale and everything like in other Total War games or whatever it is, then maybe they'd do a bit better in battles. But they don't get those bonuses. They get very, very minor bonuses on the highest difficulty, to the point where, like I said, it's just not noticeable. So that's why it gets the #1 spot. It's not really its fault. It just wasn't given uber cheats. And I do respect the developers of Medieval 2 for not going down that road and you're just being lazy and putting in uber cheats to make the game challenging and actually trying to make an AI competent. They failed in that, but they still have my respect for trying. And I think that's more important. And I kind of wish Creative Assembly continued down that line. It would have, I think, made for better Total War games. Anyway, that's my list. Let me know what you think. Which games do you think were actually should have gotten on this top 5 easiest campaign list? And which ones do you think that were on this list shouldn't have been? Let me know in the comments below. And also don't forget about the live stream tonight. I'll see you there, fuckers.